Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Fantasy Roundup here on bet.nola.com. It's brought to you by Caesar Sportsbook. I'm Zach Ewing, along with Spencer the Guru Urquhart, and we are here to talk all things fantasy sports. And, of course, this being October, that means mostly we're going to be talking fantasy football, but we got a little fantasy basketball action for you in there as well. We'll start with football. First of all, Spencer, we were talking about it offline, but that Monday night game was incredible just from a regular viewership perspective, from a gambling perspective, and certainly from a fantasy perspective as well. Titans and Bills put on a show.
Oh, definitely, man. That was a wild one. Tennessee, they brought home some winnings for people. They were able to not only cover but win outright as they're underdogs, even though they were at home. And rightfully so. I thought the Bills were gonna win it, but the Titans defense, gotta give them credit. They stopped Josh Allen there at the on 4th and 1, surprisingly, but there was a lot of fantasy points scored, being that it was a real back and forth contest. So it was great on both ends. Those who bet Tennessee, and the fantasy, we'll be talking about a lot of points. Josh Allen, Derrick Henry, it was awesome.
Yeah, we'll talk more about Derrick Henry here in a minute. I feel bad that I was not able to draft him in any of my leagues this year, and I had a chance in one league, and with a typical player, you think, oh man, that type of workload is going to catch up with him at some point. But if there's anything we've learned, is that Derrick Henry is not a typical player, right?
Yeah, one of the announcers last night, I believe, was comparing him to Earl Campbell, which is a great comparison. But it seems like Henry might actually be the better version of that, because Earl Campbell, he was great for a while, then he broke down after about 3 or 4 years. But Henry, it's like this is now like his 5th year like this, so he's been an elite running back, and he's showing no signs of slowing down. By far the best in the business right now at that position in real life and fantasy. Even though he's not a great receiver, he does enough on the ground where he's head and shoulders number one right now.
And he's doing more through I think he's got 16 catches, and he only had 20 all year last year. So yeah, it's not like he's a black hole receiving. So he's certainly, now injuries can happen to anybody, but he certainly does not look like he's run down at all. Let's go to the top scoring quarterbacks of the week. We'll start there. And again, last night was the place to look. There were no real highs. Last week there was like 4 quarterbacks above 35 points. Nothing like that this week, but Josh Allen does top the list with that performance last night. I needed a big one from him in one of my leagues, and I got it, but I still fell short because I was facing Stephon Diggs, and one of his touchdowns went to Stephon Diggs, and so I still fell short. Kirk Cousins, a big day for the Vikings. The other names you see there, all pretty much expected to be near the top of the list each week.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, I was surprised at how well Kirk Cousins did against Carolina. I'm starting to think Carolina's bit of a fool's gold team. They started off 3-0, now 3-3. It also shows a testament to Kirk Cousins that he's a QB1 this year. I normally don't say that. I mean, say, he's more just a streamer, but the way he's performed, he's looked pretty legit. The other ones, yeah, as expected. Dak, Stafford, Kyler, they're money in the bank.
Yeah, you start those guys every week if you got them. Moving on to running backs, we talked about King Henry. He is king again this week. The guy's averaging almost 30 points a week. I mean, it's ridiculous how valuable he has been. But look at number 2 on that list, Leonard Fournette. And this was a timeshare last year with Fournette and Ronald Jones. And I wanted nothing to do with it this year. But it's not a timeshare. It's Fournette's job now.
Right. Yeah, I didn't want any part of it either. But the way Fournette's taken over, he's too good to ignore. He's a borderline RB1 at this point. I'd probably still say RB2 because of the way they throw so much in Tampa Bay. But he's proved me wrong. That's for sure. I was not expecting that from him.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't want to touch it because you don't know who's going to get the carries week in and week out. But this year it's been all Fournette. And then again, the other names there, pretty much money in the bank. Jonathan Taylor, Joe Mixon, Najee Harris. If you have them, you're going to play them simply from a volume perspective. Not that they're not talented guys, but they're going to get their opportunities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, JT's really come on as of late. I mean, he is a volume guy, but they didn't run. It seemed like they didn't run a whole lot of plays in that game against the Texans. They just kind of had control as just more of an efficiency thing. He's uber efficient. So I mean, he could end up getting even better as the year goes on. It wouldn't shock me if he finishes as a top 5 running back.
Moving on to wide receivers, and the big performance, CeeDee Lamb caught a long touchdown pass during regulation, then caught another one in overtime of that Cowboys game. Overtime can be such a game changer in fantasy. I was hoping for overtime in the Monday night game so that Josh Allen could get me a few more points, but it did happen in New England, and CeeDee Lamb comes up big.
Oh yeah. You always want overtime as a fantasy owner. I always say if praying for overtime. It's always like, if I'm the one that needs points, which the only way I don't want it would be you trying to protect the lead on Monday night. Like if I was facing King Henry, then I'd be like, well, no, we do not want overtime because he's probably going to go off for another touchdown.
No, that's right. It totally depends on your situation. The big surprise, probably actually a couple of big surprises on this list too. Jalen Waddle of the Dolphins, a big game in London, and then Donovan Peoples-Jones. I mean, you could have gone through 50 wide receivers before you got to him last week.
Yeah, that came out of nowhere. Yeah, big shout out to anyone who somehow had the guts to start him in their DFS lineup because he had a pretty good week the week prior, I believe, but I wasn't expecting him to carry it over. But he ends up having an even bigger week this week, and with Odell banged up, we get to him on our waiver wire segment, man. Donovan Peoples-Jones trending up.
Yeah, he was the most points per dollar in DFS, so that was one you certainly wanted to roster. And CeeDee Lamb was another one in DFS. He was money in the bank. Tight ends, our top again, kind of a low-scoring week for tight ends. We had a couple guys on buys, but Noah Fant of the Broncos caught a touchdown pass. I know he killed me in one league, and then we had Gesicki from that London game as well.
Yep. Yeah, it's good to see Fant do that because Fant he's been pretty good this year, but it was great to see him finally have like a breakout game to really cement himself as a surefire tight end one. That was really all he was. He had a decent floor, but it was like it's the ceiling there. But he proved that this week in a breakout week. And Gesicki's been super solid, and then Kelsey and Andrew, the sneaky name there with OJ Howard with tight ends. We all know the drill there. It's kind of tough to predict, but at least we've got a few guys that are establishing themselves.
Yeah, a few more than the three we had. Well, really last year with Kittle hurt, it was only two. It was Kelsey or Waller, and if you didn't have one of those guys, you were in trouble. There's a few more this year. OJ Howard, obviously, with Gronk supposedly coming back for the Bucs this week, probably not the type of guy you target, but good to know that if Gronk is hurt, he's a pretty good handcuff too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it looks like he's probably the preferred option over Cameron Brate. It's just kind of tough with I usually don't trust two tight end systems like the Njoku Hooper. I stay away from Henry, Jonnu in New England. It's just tough to trust two tight end sets a lot of time.
So now we'll name our fantasy stars this week. And I got to quit letting Spencer pick these things first because he always takes the best guy. So, Spencer, go ahead. Take your king.
Yep. Oh, yeah. I had to do it, man. I had to do it. He's just that good, man. I've actually got a little backstory behind it because I was thinking, like, hey, maybe I'll go with CD or someone else that went off. I was like, man, I had to go with the king again because I had a league where I was down 20 or maybe 20, 25 going into last night. And my opponent also had Emmanuel Sanders. So I was down 20-something plus Sanders. I was like, well, I do have King Henry, so maybe I'm not completely out of it. And sure enough, Henry goes off 35.6. I eke out the win by, I think it was like 3 or 4 points. And I was like, oh, man. I was like, like King Henry does it again. Yeah. Let's do it. That was my big money league, too, so I was really hyped.
It's not like Emmanuel Sanders had a bad night either. I think he had 5 catches, 91 yards, so Henry really had to do work to get you there, but it worked out. And you saw that note, 170 points. So I mentioned before, that's like 27 points per game he's at right now. I mean, that's the best week of the season for most guys. That's his average right now through 6 weeks, 27 points.
It's insane. Yeah, his week 1 was, I think he had like 10 points. For instance, that was a garbage week. It's just terrible. It's crazy.
And since then, he's averaging more than 30.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy because you think like at week 1, you're like, oh, well, it's still decent, But then looking back on, he set the standard so high now that'll probably be his worst week of the year at the rate it's going. Yeah,
and then the other thing about last night, he only had 20 carries, so it wasn't. They have these games where he gets 28, 31 carries, and you think, oh, he's going to get run down. He only had to carry 20 times last night and got to 35 points. My fantasy star for week 6 was another name you mentioned. It's CeeDee Lamb. 9 catches, 149 yards, 2 touchdowns. He had the overtime touchdown catch when you thought the Cowboys, who had already made a stop so they could set up for a field goal to win it. I talked about this on Odds and Ends yesterday. I was ticked off because I had Patriots plus 4.5, and it's like, just kick the field goal, Dallas. Come on. But from a fantasy perspective, it was great. CeeDee Lamb pops off and gets the job done for Dallas there. Interesting thing about him in the DraftKings, they call it the Millie Maker, their most popular main slate DFS game where the winner becomes a millionaire. It's a $2 million prize. The top 11 finishers in the Millie Maker all had CeeDee Lamb. So he was literally the most valuable guy in that main slate, which is just the afternoon games on Sunday. So it doesn't include the primetime games. And CeeDee Lamb made a lot of people a lot of money.
Oh, yeah, I believe it. Yeah, I wish I had more shares of him, like you mentioned. I wish he had more Henry. I have one league with CD. I actually had CD and Henry, so it's safe to say I got the dub in that one. And it was because the rest of my team wasn't even that great. I had Kyle Pitts was on bye, so basically I had no tight end. I had CEH hurt. I had Montgomery. It's a mash unit, but I have Henry and Lamb, so it made up for it.
All right. That will put a bow on week 6. Let's move ahead and talk some week 7. We hit on some waiver wire targets last week. A couple of good ones we had for you. I know what we said. Hunter Henry, he cashed in a touchdown. I think we said Alex Collins had a good week for the Seahawks. So there was a couple of good picks there last week. What do we have for you this week? Spencer, go ahead with your waiver wire targets for week 7.
All right. Yeah, I'll start with the quarterback. For those that need to stream, Tua Tagovailoa against the Falcons, I think could be a good play. He returned from his rib injury. He came back and did well against Jacksonville. Gets another cake matchup this week against Atlanta. So I think he'll be able to keep that momentum going. He's got the good chemistry, with Waddle, Gesicki, Devontae Parker. He's got some weapons there. So I'm liking Tua this week as a streamer, not really a for sure like locked in option, but with so many guys on bye week, like Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, a lot of y'all probably need a fill-in QB this week. I think he's a good guy to have. Outside of that, though, man, it's tough. It's tough for those that need running backs and receivers. Running backs really weren't any, but Rashad Penny, Alex Collins left the game late. He's banged up, it looks like. So if he somehow can't go Monday against the Saints, Rashad Penny's supposed to be back. I know he's injury prone himself, but he might be the primary runner there in what's a run-heavy Seahawks offense. I think he's worth a dart throw. Could have some value moving forward with Chris Carson potentially out a while. And then Donovan Peoples-Jones, who we mentioned earlier, he's only owned in 1.2% of leagues. It's if you need a receiver, he's a great guy to grab because he's got good chemistry right now with Baker and the Odell Jarvis both banged up, so he should continue seeing a lot of looks.
Yeah, I like that. Especially as you mentioned, it's just they're calling it buy-mageddon in the fantasy community because so many of the top teams have their buys at the same time. I know I have a super flex league where both quarterbacks are on buy, plus two of my 3 receivers, plus one of my running backs. And it's just like, what do you do? And you scour the waiver wire, and there's not really a lot of good options out there this week. So it is a tough week for waiver targets, and everybody's going to be after anything that's still out there. So I came up with a couple more. You mentioned Rashad Penny. I like if Penny's still on the IR, we don't know for sure he's going to be back. And this one's tricky because they play Monday night. They play the Saints.
Right.
But if Penny can't come back, and if Alex Collins can't go, DJ Dallas all of a sudden becomes the number one guy. He catches some passes. He's only owned in 1.5% of leagues. Either way, you would think if Collins is banged up or if Penny comes back and they don't want to give him a full workload, if you're desperate, you could start DJ Dallas. He's going to catch 3 or 4 passes. He's not going to be a black hole. You're not going to be taking a 2 here. He might get you 6 or 8 points. Maybe you get lucky. He gets in the end zone. But if you're desperate, he's a guy you could look at. Wide receiver, I went with Rashad Bateman of the Ravens. He's back. He's healthy. He's a rookie. And Lamar Jackson went to him last week against the Chargers. He seemed to look underneath a little bit more. Marquise Brown's target share was down. Rashad Bateman's was up. So if you're looking for a receiver, not the worst idea in the world there. He's owned in about 21% of leagues. And then for tight end, Ricky Seals-Jones, if he's still out there with Logan Thomas hurt, it certainly looks like the Washington football team is going to target Seals-Jones just as they targeted Logan Thomas, and he could be a good bye week fill in there too.
Most definitely. I like all those. I can't argue with that, especially Bateman. And Bateman's somebody that, well, yeah, I liked him, even as a sleeper dart throw this week guy. I was surprised he's still owned in that few leagues. And then I looked again, like, oh, yeah, he is. I'm like, wow. I was like, yeah, I'm definitely going to be targeting him in any leagues he's available because he's somebody that's got a lot of upside. Like, even if he don't have room for him this week, he's somebody that moving forward I think could be really good because we know Sammy Watkins, we know the drill there, super injury prone, not reliable. Hollywood Brown shows flashes, but just never has really established himself as a truly consistent guy there, where Bateman, I feel like he could maybe be that guy. And then, RSJ, of course, without Logan Thomas there, they don't really have much else outside of Scary Terry, and he seems to be getting a pretty consistent share of targets.
Speaking of Ricky Seals-Jones, I might have stolen a little bit of your thunder as we go on to DFS values for this week. He's one of the guys you're targeting in DFS, only 3,700 on DraftKings.
Yeah, I was surprised at how low his price was. He's probably I couldn't really find a whole lot of great values at running back, receiver, quarterback. I went with a stack with Stafford and Robert Woods because I feel like they're going to really go off this week against Detroit. It's going to be a statement game for them. I think McVay is going to really want to stick it to Jared Goff because Jared Goff is struggling right now like a deer in the headlights. They're going to really put it to him, I think. And Stafford, I think he's going to unleash and score a ton of points. Cooper Kupp is obviously a great play too if you can afford him, but he's so expensive. He's now, I think, the top receiver outside of Adams and Hill. He's the top three guy, like at 8,600. So I feel like Woods was maybe a little better value there at 6,400 because they'll probably look to spread the ball around. Maybe even if you want to take a late dart throw, a cheap guy like Van Jefferson, Deshaun Jackson. But I feel like Woods has a lot more stable floor and is a reasonable price. And then Kenyon Drake at running back, they got him a lot more involved this week now that John Gruden's out of town. They seem to really want to feature Drake more this week, and that was encouraging to see. And his price is pretty reasonable there at 4,900.
Yeah, absolutely. And that Rams, the Stafford game, I don't want to call it a revenge game because I don't know that he has hard feelings toward the Lions, but there's no doubt.
His former team, yeah.
Yeah, he's going to want to show that, hey, I'm still that guy and have a big day against the Lions. You would think. I think there's quite a few possibilities for the Rams there, and I'll get to another one here in a little bit. But my DFS values for Week 7, I also like the Rams stack. I think a Cardinals stack could work against Houston too. Kyler Murray, maybe a DeAndre Hopkins if you can afford him, or even going down the list to a Rondale Moore or one of his other targets, Zach Ertz, obviously now in Arizona. So that's another thought. But I went away from that and I thought I found some pretty good values here. Matt Ryan early in the year was not throwing the ball quite as much, but now it sure seems like he is. And his passing yards have been up the last few weeks as well. And so I like him if you can get him at just 5,700 with the Falcons playing the Dolphins, who have given up some big numbers. And Darrell Williams of the Chiefs, priced down low. I mean, honestly, I was surprised to see his usage last week. The Chiefs used him more than they had been using Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Now they're going up against the Titans on a short week. The only thing here is the Titans are banged up in the secondary, so maybe the Chiefs throw the ball a lot. But I think at 5,800, Darrell Williams is a good guy to roster. Went with Chris Godwin of the Bucs. The Bears tend to take away your top receiving threat, and so if Antonio Brown is not getting a lot of the targets, or Mike Evans, Godwin's only 5,900. Brady tends to spread it around, so went with Chris Godwin there. And then Dallas Goedert, back from the COVID list, and with Zach Ertz moved on to Arizona, we've seen Jalen Hurts target that tight end. We've seen it time and time again. I think it'll happen again. They have the Raiders. They should be needing to score some points and move the ball. And so I think Dallas Goedert could pop off.
Yeah, that's an Eagles thing, pepper the tight ends. And now that they finally moved on from Ertz, Goddard, I think, could have some serious potential here moving forward. Godwin's an interesting case, because it's just kind of hard to predict which one's going to eat out of him, AB, and Evans. But I kind of think I see your logic there. It might go back to more to Godwin this week because that with watching film, the Bears coach is going to be like, we can't let AB beat us. We got to take him out of the game. So this might be a Godwin or Evans type game. I noticed that as like that's kind of a trend I've been noticing. It's hard for guys to string together 2 great weeks because it seems like with the way that coaches, they'll see that from the previous week's film and they'll be like, oh, we're going to take him out of the game. A lot of times it's hard to string that together unless you're like Devontae Adams, Cooper Kupp, or King Henry.
And in DFS, like to your point, you have to take those dart throws. You have to take some risks. Godwin might bust, but if he is the Bucs receiver who goes off at 5,900, he could be a lineup winner like CeeDee Lamb was last week. I mean, and in DFS, you got to have those big days from people who aren't big money guys if you're going to win, because we're not talking about it is in a week-long fantasy, season-long fantasy where you just have to beat one opponent. You've got to finish in the top 5 or 10% to make the money in these things. So you've got to have those big days.
Yeah, that's in DFS. It's like go big or go home. You know, it's if he can hit, you'll go home a winner. So I can't wait whenever it launches. I'll have to try the DraftKings or the Caesars, the multiplier. Man, I'm excited.
The super draft, with Caesar Sportsbook is their DFS option, and it's a lot of fun. And I mean, but again, it doesn't matter. Okay, I finished in the 60th percentile. Well, that's great, but it doesn't win you anything. You need to be up in the 90th percentile. And so you have to take those risks. It's a different game than season long is. You're more interested in the ceiling than you are the floor. Speaking of which, how about some sleepers in week 7 who could pop off? A familiar name that we already mentioned, Spencer.
Yeah, Rashad Bateman, man. I feel like he's just I have a good feeling about this one. I mean, there's no guarantees, obviously, in fantasy, but he's one that I just feel really good, this week and moving forward, especially moving forward. But this week, I think he could do well against the Bengals. There, they're gonna. I think it's gonna be an air raid type game. I don't think it's gonna be like last week where they'll be able to get a big lead. I think Joe Burrow, man, they're gonna be determined to show that they're a true contender in the AFC North. Both teams, but vying for first place in that division. Surprisingly, not many people expected the Bengals to be a contender there, but they got a legit shot with the Browns and the Steelers down right now, so this will be their chance to make a statement. And I think Bateman could be that secret weapon that Lamar Jackson relies on because they know about Andrews, they know about Hollywood Brown. Bateman's still kind of an unknown, and I mean they're aware of his ability, but they can't really game plan too much against him when you've got 2 other great weapons there with Andrews and Brown. Yeah,
absolutely. And anybody who watched Rashad Bateman play at Minnesota knows the guy has talent. For my sleeper, I went back to the Rams, and we talked about their passing game, but I like Darrell Henderson here too. The Lions have given up a 90-plus yard rusher every week of the season except for one, and that was, I think, the week 1 against the 49ers where several different guys went off against him. And then Darrell Henderson got 25 carries last week, 26 carries. They're feeding him. They should have a lead. This is a guy in the second half who maybe he bursts a couple of big runs on Detroit.
Yeah, I mentioned him in my DFS values last week, and sure enough, he had a big game. I was happy to see that. So he's getting to the point where it's like kind of hard to call him a sleeper, man. He's rolling. I'd say he's like a guy that's like in season long. I drafted him in like the middle round, but he's really like he's somebody now. I just set it and forget it with him.
Yeah, he's been fantastic, and I think a lot of people were worried about the Rams running game without Cam Akers, who got hurt in the preseason, but Darrell Henderson has proved to be legit. So you're right, maybe a little bit cheap to call him a sleeper, but I do think in DFS situations he's underpriced, and people are talking about Stafford and the Lions, but keep an eye on Darrell Henderson as well. So you see, indeed. In fantasy football this week, Spencer and I, we come up with these names independently of each other. I do make sure I go through and make sure we have no duplicates, but we do like a lot of the same players. I mean, like I mentioned Bateman in pickups. You mentioned him as a sleeper. We mentioned the Rams. We talked about the Cardinals. It is a spot where a lot of people may be focusing on those matchups. But interesting thing is we've come to a consensus on these guys.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we got a lot of similarities, no doubt. I got a few differences, though. It's always good to be a little different, but yeah, for the most part, we're on the same page on a lot of stuff. So that's cool to see.
On the same page. So if these guys are available, go get them on the waiver wire. Otherwise, in DFS, you might target them. Be careful, though, in DFS. The other part of that is you don't want to get the guy that everybody's targeting. And so if you do that, then you end up, there's no advantage to it. So before we go, let's talk a little fantasy basketball. Spencer and I had our fantasy basketball draft last night in his Guru Fantasy Basketball League. And here's how round one went. A little bit of a surprise at the top. And you say, this guy was a homer pick. He's a Hawks fan. Trae Young went number 1.
Oh, man. Yeah, he didn't want first pick because he was determined. I was like, you're not really going to do it, huh? And he's like, he put like the popcorn emoji or whatever. I was like, oh, Lord, he's going to do it. And sure enough, yeah, that was wild, man. Hey, if it hits, he can brag because everyone roasted him. If everyone's like, LOL, like, what are you doing, man? But if Trae Young, if he's truly iced Trae all year, it might work. You never know. But yeah, I would have most definitely rather Joker, who you got it too, or Giannis or Luka for sure if I had that first pick.
Yeah, I was sitting there at number 2 thinking I got to decide between Giannis and Luka. Who do I want here? And then he took Trae Young, and I thought, well, I guess Jokic is the guy who's going to help you in the most categories. So I'll go ahead and take him. The rest of the first round was more or less according to plan. You picked at number 9, Spencer.
Right. Yeah, I was hoping to get one of the 2 elite point guards there, either Curry or Damian Lillard. I was wanting one of them, or maybe Harden. I wasn't too big on Harden, though. I don't know, man. He had the hamstring linger last year. The Nets is just kind of a weird deal there. I was hoping to a Curry or Dame. Didn't get either one. I'm okay with Bradley Beal at 9. He was somebody that I was like, if I don't get there, he's like my backup plan because I think he might end up even better this year with Russ out of there, give him even more opportunities to be that volume guy, that usage hog. Because I was like, oh, well, the Wizards suck. Why would you want Bradley Beal? Like, well, that's even more reason I want him in. They're terrible, so that's going to
somebody's got to score.
He might be the points leader this year. He might average 35 a game, in which he'd be a steal at pick 9. So I ended up with Devin Booker as my point guard. Surprised that he fell kind of far. I think to the 4th round. So I got a good backcourt there. My bigs are pretty solid. I think the thing I was a little concerned about with my wings weren't super strong, but overall was pretty happy with how it turned out.
Yeah, I think it's been a couple years since I played fantasy basketball, so I'm looking forward to getting back into it. Jokic was my number 1 pick. I went with Russell Westbrook at number 2 as my point guard. Got a couple of Bulls. I got DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine, so we'll hope the Bulls have a big season. And then I think I got the top 2 picks in the draft. I got Cade Cunningham and Jalen Green.
Yeah, which I know with the rookies.
Yeah, the rookies are a little bit risky, but we'll see what happens there. So we'll keep you updated on how the Guru's Fantasy Basketball League goes. And if you want to get in on the action, if you have a lineup question, you have a waiver wire question, a start and sit question, you can ask Spencer the Guru on Twitter or Instagram. He is at Spencer the Guru. Spencer, any good questions you got this week?
Oh yeah, I'm sure I got them here. I got to get them, help the people out. They got some. They had one from my boy Santana. He was wondering about a trade. He was wondering Waller and Burrow for Chase and Goddard. Which side wins? And I'm on the Chase Goddard side. I mean, unless it's super flex, but he didn't say that, so I'm assuming. I mean, Burrow's good, but Chase and Goddard. I know Waller's a little upgrade over Goddard, but to me, Chase is much more valuable than Burrow in a regular PPR league.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think in quarterbacks, if it's not a super flex, there's about 12 guys who are going to finish within 5 points of each other in any given week, and Burrow's one of them. And so you could go find somebody else to replace him.
Yeah, definitely, yeah, because he's been good, but yeah, he's just they've quarterbacks are kind of a dime a dozen in single QB unless you've got like Mahomes or Allen.
Right. No doubt about that. So that's an example of the type of question Spencer will get. You can reach out to him on social media and ask him your own questions. Other than that, we will be back with you next Tuesday on the Fantasy Roundup. Invite you to join us on Thursday for At the Book. That's our weekend betting preview. Myself, Jim Derry, and Devin Jackson will be with you for that one. And Spencer will be back next week on the Fantasy Roundup. Hope you join us, everybody. Thanks for watching.